Hi, Father Dan. It's great to talk to you again.
I know it's been too long.
Normally, my normal introduction is welcome back to the Quest podcast, but today we're doing a special episode, which I was trying to think if we've ever done this before. I think we might have done one episode that aired on both Quest and on Karate Priest, but we're doing one tonight that is going to be a Quest episode and a Karate Priest episode. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we did for one for Quest and Karate Priest, and that was a while back, but great to be back.
Yeah, we're back because we have a particularly newsworthy and sad event. The Pope died last night, and I thought this would be an opportunity for us to talk about that to people and just chat about this doesn't happen often for some people, especially the Gen Zs. This might be the first time they've ever seen a new Pope get elected. So I thought we could chat about that a little bit today, and then at the end of the episode, we could just generally catch up and tell everyone what you've been up to.
Yeah, definitely sounds good.
So I think we'll get started with just like we just heard the announcement in the middle of the night. I think it was like 4 o'clock in the morning when I saw it come up on my phone, and I was like, and I thought, well, what's going on at that point when a pope dies? What's the first thing the Vatican does? Like, is what kind of is there like is everyone getting calls, and are they already setting up to have some sort of memorial, or are they already going into like the conclave? Like, what's the first things happening after the death of a pope?
So there's protocols in place for when this happens. Now, I'm not a Vatican insider. I haven't, I'm really not the best in terms of, exactly what happens. But obviously, one of the first things they're going to do is make the official announcement to the world, and that's what happened this morning. So Pope Francis passed away at 7:35 Rome time, and the announcement was made by the what's called the Camerlengo, who is kind of like the Pope's, executive officer, if you want to call him that. And
Hmm.
so he made the official announcement at 9:35 a.m., so 2 hours after the Pope had officially passed. And then what happens is that, yes, it sets off a bit of a chain reaction of events in terms of mourning. Um, I believe his funeral is supposed to be within 4 to 6 days of his passing. But whenever the Pope passes away, there's usually also a 9 day novena of prayer of mourning for the Pope and praying for the repose of the soul. And then also praying for the Holy Spirit to guide the church in selecting his successor. And so that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, he just passed away this morning, so he we begin that period of mourning of the 9 days, and then the funeral should be sometime this week. It's too soon for them to have released any details of that yet.
Yeah.
But the conclave, I think from what I heard, the conclave will not begin as early as May 6th. Will be the earliest they can convene because they have to give time for all these cardinals to make plans, the cardinal electors. And the cardinal electors are cardinals who are under the age of 80. Once they reach the age of 80, they can no longer vote in the conclave.
Hmm.
So all the eligible cardinals who can vote will be summoned to Rome, and the conclave will begin at a date which is to be determined.
Wow. And I was just hearing bits and pieces of how the conclave works. They vote 4 times a day. Is that what I heard? They're kind of like confined somewhere in the Vatican, and they vote 4 times a day, and there needs to be a certain percentage of vote for a candidate to be considered. Or do you know the details on that?
Yeah, there's several rounds a day. Four sounds about right. And it's a 2/3 majority. It's not a simple majority. It has to be a 2/3 majority. And so it normally takes several rounds of voting. I can't recall off the top of my head how many rounds it took for Francis to be elected. Um, but that's what they'll do is they'll collect all the votes of a particular round, and if a pope is not elected with a 2/3 majority, they take the ballots themselves of that round, and they will burn them. They will burn those ballots in a furnace in the Sistine Chapel, and the smoke will be black. Once the Pope or once a candidate is elected by a 2/3 majority, that smoke will turn white to indicate that a new pontiff has been elected.
Got it. Got it. Now, how are people considered for the job of the Pope? Is that can people put themselves up for consideration? Or is there always a short list of people? How does that work? How do they know who to vote for?
I guess you could say there's a popular list of likely candidates.
Mhm.
It, I don't think there's a precise science as to, you know, exactly who's expected to be chosen. I remember in the last conclave back in 2013, um, this was the first conclave with iPhones and smartphones available. So I
Mm.
remember there was a conclave app that would rank the cardinal electors based on the likelihood that they would get elected. And I remember Francis was nowhere towards the top of that list. He was actually, I think, somewhere in the mid 30s. Now
Wow.
that's an app, right? And Lord knows who's contributing to that. The reality
Yeah.
is, Jorge Bergoglio was the first runner-up in the papal conclave of 2005 that elected Pope Benedict XVI. So it was very clear from the get-go that Francis was popular before he was
Yeah.
Francis. so
Wow.
so sometimes you don't know. I mean, of course, we're seeing articles now of people speculating who might be the next pope and who are the likely candidates. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see exactly what happens. But at this point, technically any male who is able to be ordained a bishop, and I think the threshold age is like 30 or 35 or something at least, um, is eligible, but usually they're elected from the College of Cardinals. I think that a cardinal has been elected pope since at least the 14th century.
Wow. Wow. Well, it's interesting, and certainly I think there's a lot more public interest in this from pop culture these days because of the Peacock miniseries Conclave that, like, got all kinds of critical acclaim. Now, probably not a very realistic version of what's really happening in the conclave, but I think it has the attention of people now, maybe a little bit more because of something like that. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I haven't seen Conclave. From the reviews I heard, I would prefer not to watch it. Um,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there's some details that are correct.
Mm.
And yeah, I mean, conclaves tend to draw a lot of people's attention. I think of the Dan Brown movie, Angels and Demons, which was about a
Mhm.
conclave, and so there always seems to be interest around this because we're talking about the choosing of the leader of the largest single religious institution on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
A religious institution that isn't just a religious institution, also has its own nation state, has its own political system. So this is huge. We're talking about, the spiritual leader whom other world leaders travel to come see. I think King Charles III was planning to come see Pope Francis in the Vatican, and was postponing his visit because of the Pope's health concerns. And so, yeah, this is a big deal.
Absolutely, absolutely. Did you ever meet Pope Francis?
No, I never got to. I've never been to Rome, and that's usually where most people get to meet him because he is traveling a lot. But to get like a kind of like a face to face meeting with him, normally one has to go to Rome for that.
Yeah. Well, he did the tour in America. I wasn't sure if maybe, like, you were ever around when he was touring America, but,
I
I
was in the
imagine that's
seminary
a
at that time. It was hard for us to get away, so we were
sure.
practically living under rocks.
Right, right. Now, when you mentioned, kind of what's gonna happen in these next few days, how will we see any difference in, like, what a Sunday church service is like? Is there gonna be anything in addition or new added to those days?
There's going to be some additions and some subtractions.
Mhm.
So the additions are usually special prayer intentions for the Holy Father. So in the prayers of the faithful that usually happen after the gospel reading and after the creed on Sundays, we have what's called the universal prayer or the prayer of the faithful. And that's where you'll probably have a special intention for the Holy Father. That'll be added there. The subtraction is during the Eucharistic prayer, there's a portion in the anamnesis after the consecration where it usually has the priest pray for the current pope as well as the bishop of the place where he's celebrating that mass. So like when I celebrate mass on a military installation, normally the last couple of years I would say Francis our pope and Timothy our bishop.
Mm.
And so since we are sede vacante now, meaning empty chair, we do not say the phrase Francis our Pope because we currently don't have a Pope. So that
Ah,
phrase now will be together with Timothy our Bishop is what it goes straight to. Now, in my home diocese in home of Thibodaux, Louisiana, the diocese itself is sede vacante. We currently do not have a bishop in my home diocese. So it's a double sede vacante back home. And so for that part of the Eucharistic prayer, we skip the naming of the Pope and the Bishop altogether because we have neither at the moment.
wow. Wow. Yeah, because in your home in your hometown, your bishop went to Louisville, right?
Correct, yes,
Yeah.
and then his successor we had for about a year, actually less than a year, and he
Mm.
passed away very tragically from a medical procedure.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't even know that. We haven't caught
No,
up
it's
in so
been
long.
a
I
while
didn't
since
even know
we
about
caught
that.
up. Yeah, yeah, so,
Wow.
yeah, that was Bishop Mario Dorsonville, and, had the
Mm.
pleasure of getting to serve as the, caretaker of the cathedral for his installation, and, then I left to go to active duty, and then, last January, he passed away, from complications due to, liver failure.
Mm. Wow. Um, what do you think the legacy of Pope Francis will be? What do you essentially serving under him for so long now? Like, what have been the takeaways for you? How has this Pope been special to you?
So, I mean, shoot, I was a freshman in college when Pope Francis was elected, and I distinctly remember being a band librarian at McNeese State University and having the live stream of the conclave on the computer and being at work and just staring at the screen and copying music, waiting for a signal of white or black smoke, and then all of a sudden I see the white smoke, and then I had a wind symphony rehearsal immediately afterwards. So I distinctly remember from the get go, and that was the semester I was applying for seminary. So
Mm.
Francis was the Pope for my entire time in seminary, and then my entire priesthood so far. Um, so for me, like his whole pontificate is what really formed my seminary formation and my priestly formation. So what he did for me, and I think for most of the world, was just being a priest of humility. Just he broke a lot of protocols that were standard, not anything that was breaking barriers or things like that. But simply, it was mostly to do with the simplicity of his person. Not wearing the traditional red shoes that the Pope normally wears, not wearing the usual pontifical crucifix that the Pope would wear. So things like that. He wanted to make things simple again, but simply also to get the church out to the margins. He talks so much about marginalized people, so people like migrants, people who identify as LGBTQ, and how to minister to them, how to get them back into the fold. Especially those who are struggling with their identity and struggling with their sense of God. And so, trying to build bridge to reconnect people who perhaps have been marginalized, and call them to conversion, call them back into the church.
Mhm.
Certainly, I think a big word in his pontificate was mercy, and he was very much a merciful person, because mercy is oftentimes what breaks the hardness of people's hearts. So, if I had to summarize his
Yeah.
pontificate, that's what it would be.
Wow. No, that's really special. That's beautiful what you said there.
Yeah.
Do you think when new leadership comes in, do you how often do we see like new leadership rewrite what other people did? I mean, is there a possibility that things may get stricter or take a different direction under new leadership, or does it generally kind of stay the course? Do you feel?
It all depends on who's elected.
Mhm.
I remember when John Paul II died. We went to Benedict XVI afterwards, and Benedict XVI was very much a protege of JP2. Benedict XVI was the head of the dicastery. It was now called the dicastery, then called the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. But Benedict XVI, at the time Cardinal Ratzinger, celebrated the funeral liturgy for John Paul II, and then ended up becoming the next pope.
Mhm.
So I feel like there's a lot of continuity there. And then Francis is elected, and it was quite a bit of a shift. And so I really can't say exactly where the next pope's going to go in terms of how he sees doctrine and things like that. Obviously, dogma is unchanging in the church, and doctrine is unchanging. But at least to see what does he emphasize, kind of like Francis did.
Mhm.
That's kind of what we'll be looking at, and to see how does he intend to engage people. That's always going to be the big thing there. So yeah.
Right. And Francis was the first Latin pope in like a number of years, right? And maybe
He was
do
the first pope from Latin America.
the first. Okay, the first. Wow. Um, what's the chances we'll ever get an American pope? Is that even in the cards? Like, wow, what is it that what is it that our guys aren't? Why aren't we being considered? Do you think?
Well, I think because in many ways in the U.S. we think that we lead the world. In certain cases, yes, we absolutely lead the world in certain areas.
Mm,
I think what happens is that, because the church is universal and by and large, I think a lot of time the American mindset tends to be one that sees very much inside and not so much outside. That perhaps doesn't relate as well with other cultures.
mhm.
Um, and so I really think I highly doubt that the next pope will be an American pope. I think there's a lot of front runners from other parts of the world, and I think Pope Francis was intentionally trying to get more representation in the College of Cardinals from the peripheries because he stressed the periphery so much that he was naming cardinals from places that had maybe never had a cardinal before, or typically were not the sees of bishops that would normally have a cardinal. So I think it's
Yeah.
very intentional that perhaps the next pope will not be from Europe, may not be from the Americas. We shall see. I think there's a great chance we could have an African or an Asian pope.
Yeah, I hear that there's 2 front runners that are very much, could be very different popes for us.
Indeed, yes.
Is there anything else you wanna add about Pope Francis? I don't have many more questions, and this is certainly a joint podcast, so I want you to, talk about whatever you wanna talk about, but, like, do you have any other takeaways or anything you wanna add about just how you felt about this experience and working under, Pope Francis um and just all of this in general? I mean, even the circumstances of he died hours after Easter. I think maybe in some parts of the world, it might have still been Easter when he died, depending on, I guess, what time zone you're in. But do you have any other feelings or anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I was telling people today because I first saw the news when I woke up at 5 a.m. Alaska time, which would have been 9 o'clock a.m. your time over on the East Coast. And I think actually the Pope would have probably passed away. You're right. It would have still been Easter here, I think in Alaska at least. Because next thing I know, when I woke up, I had a message from a friend of mine who's been deployed in the East, and it was midnight my time, and he'd already sent me a link to an article that the Pope had passed. And so, yeah, you're right. To me, what's striking was the fact that Pope Francis literally worked till the day he died.
He did.
I mean, think of it. He gave his last Orbi et Orbi blessing. So for the world and for the city of Rome, blessing yesterday for Easter. It met with Vice President Vance yesterday for Easter, and then the next day he passes. And so it's amazing the fact that he was out and about making his last public appearances right up until he died. And I think that just characterizes who he was, someone who was
Yeah.
going to push past whatever pain he was in, simply to encounter people where they need to be encountered and do what was always best for the church. But I will always remember him as a very simple and humble man, um, who certainly, I think was a pope we needed for our times. And again, to really just kind of break the hardness of hearts. Culture's changing, and I find in today's day and age, especially with social media, which was something that really kind of came about under Benedict's pontificate, really started to flourish under Benedict's pontificate. That with the way in which we engage with one another certainly required the breaking of the hardness of hearts, and I think he did that so well.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's beautifully said. I really appreciate you sharing that. Um, so we have many weeks to follow what's going to happen here. So maybe
Yeah,
we'll have another special episode after we have a new pope, and we can talk about that.
perhaps we shall see. It would be great to kind of recap this in hindsight and unpack the events of what's happened in a few weeks.
We haven't talked in many months. We haven't had a podcast episode in probably easily a year. I know you were
Oh,
on
come
my
on, for
last
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I know
think
you were on my last season 6. I think you did show up, on that, but you haven't been on season 7 yet, and I had been wanting to invite you for season 7. I'm only about halfway through it, and then this came up, so I'm like, "Well, why not go ahead and, invite Father Dan to come on, and we'll chat about this," but, I wanted to just
I've,
kind of update the fans, the listeners and whatnot about just what you've been up to because you've been such a regular guest, and we haven't had any karate priests in a long time. We've been season 2 ended, and you went active duty and we haven't done one. We need to probably change it to like the karate airman now or the karate chaplain now, or, we have to change the name of the podcast
oh
for you.
man.
But how have you adapted? Like, how long have you been in Alaska now?
Yeah, I've been in Alaska for just over a year and a half now. So let's see, it was mid-February, made a year and a half, and so we're at what 20 months now of
So
my
you're
time.
totally used to the snow now because you had never seen it before when you
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's gotten to the point where anytime it does snow, it's like, okay, this is getting kind of old. This winter, surprisingly, was far more mild compared to last winter. My first winter up here was insane. I think we were less than 2 inches away from breaking the all-time snow record for Anchorage. Um, it was something wild like that. I remember we had a giant snowpocalypse Veterans Day weekend, my first winter up here, where I had to basically dig a trench out my front door to get to my driveway and the sidewalk. It was absolutely, and then this winter it was
Wow.
hardly anything. It was polar opposites, and so yeah, it's definitely having adjusted to that. A big adjustment up here is getting used to the extremes of daylight versus darkness. And so I got here in August of 2023 to where it was still, towards the end of summer, we had a lot of good daylight. And then you start to see the switch in about October and really in November for sure, where it's darker. It gets so much darker and it looks like the sun's struggling to come up, where you're
Wow.
having to take vitamin D supplements to keep your energy up because you're not getting all that natural vitamin D from the sun as much.
Mm.
And then in the summer, we're getting to this point now where the sunrise is at like 6:30 in the morning and it doesn't start setting until 9:30 at night. So
Wow.
I just had my Easter vigil up here this past Saturday, and typically we'll start it at about 8 o'clock in the evening because you don't want it to be too late for your families, and at the same time, it can't be too early. Typically, it's not supposed to start till after sunset. That's a bit of a problem in Alaska because the sun almost just doesn't set. So
Wow.
it was strange singing the Exultet and talking about banishing the darkness of this night where it's still daylight outside because right now the sun's not setting normally. So,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
And you also, since you've been up there, you've gotten to experience auroras for the first time, right?
Oh yes, and that's absolutely gorgeous. I've gotten some phenomenal photos, and iPhones do an extremely good job of and I'm sure any smartphone can do this, of just like with the cameras nowadays, the way they filter light really brings out the color spectrum. Um, on a really good light show, you can see the northern lights with a naked eye and watch them dance. But the phones can really bring out the color spectrum in a way that the naked eye just can't.
Wow. So, pretty much exactly the opposite of where how and where you lived in Louisiana, pretty much, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Louisiana was so flat, and we live up against the mountains here in Alaska, and I do a lot of hiking and skiing with friends. Skiing, I just got into. That was a bit of a disaster this winter. I'm not used to skiing, but we will make that adjustment. So, yeah, the activities are so much different. Ice skating, skiing. Tried
Did
both of
did I
those.
see you sliding down a glacier one time? I can't remember if that was you.
Yeah, so, there's the Matanuska Glacier, about a 2-hour drive from here, and I've been there twice actually for some resiliency events on the base, and so, and that's amazing because, both times I went, the tour's not the same because the glacier is constantly shifting, and in a year's time, the face of the glacier is not gonna be the same as it was a year before.
Hmm.
So it's amazing to, go hike in the crevasses in the glacier and to see the different formations. And yeah, it's such a great natural beauty up here. And it's a really just adventurous place. Anybody should put this on their bucket list for sure.
Do you miss Louisiana?
I do. I specifically miss the food in my family and friends. I think Cajun food is something that I get the craving for every once in a while, and thankfully, up here in Anchorage, there's two Cajun food trucks that come on the base pretty regularly, and they both know me by name at this point because
You're a regular
anytime I
customer.
see them, oh yeah, anytime I see them, you know, I definitely stop and get me a bowl of gumbo, and their gumbo is actually phenomenal, for being 4,000 miles away from home. So yeah, it's pretty darn
Wow.
good.
Well,
Yeah.
what is the best cuisine in Alaska? What are you finding that's, like, very uniquely Alaska that you like to eat?
The fish for sure. I mean, the salmon is incredible, and there's so many ways that people cook it up here and prepare it. Halibut has been amazing too. I've had a halibut po' boy. I've had halibut and chips. A particular delicacy up here of the halibut is the halibut cheeks, and it's exactly what it sounds like. There's a fillet right inside the cheek of a halibut that you can harvest, and they make like a medallion out of it, and they serve that as a protein. at some fine dining restaurants up here, and so that was pretty good too. It's a very fine fillet.
Wow. What is your day-to-day like? Like, how is being a priest on a military base different than being in your home church? What's the same or what's different about it?
So, what's the same about I'll start with that. The same is that I'm, running a Catholic parish, just like any priest normally would. And so I have my mass schedule, my confession schedule, all my sacraments, things like that. Where things get different is the fact that I'm really dual-hatted because I'm a priest, but I'm also a staff officer. And so I have officer responsibilities, so generic chaplain responsibilities. So I'm loaned out as chaplain to the wing staff agencies. Um, which is a lot of the support agencies like legal, public affairs, finance, um, things like that. So I'm their chaplain, get to visit them. But then also I serve as a contracting officer and acquisitions officer for the chapel. So things like that. I serve as a chaplain for our sexual assault prevention response coordinators, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot of just like staff responsibilities that go into it. So it really is. It feels sometimes like I work two jobs and I have to switch hats from being an Air Force chaplain and an officer, and then back to being a Catholic priest.
Yeah. Well, there is one job we haven't mentioned that we have to catch everyone up on, and that is the karate priest part of this. So you've received like several more accolades and awards and
Yeah.
belts and gold medals and all like whatever they give you in karate. You've gotten more stuff. So tell everyone where that journey is at for you in your world of karate.
Yeah, for sure. So when I got up here to Alaska, it kind of came on my own to take over my own training. And so I started teaching a few airmen here in the base. And so I have about a half dozen students that will get together twice a week and we'll train. And we have uniforms, belts, we buy all their gear and stuff. And so we have a functional class and uh so that's that. So we've been training and then back in August, I received a surprise promotion to fifth degree black belt since I was eligible to get my fourth degree caught up in the Kukiwan World Taekwondo headquarters. And what some organizations will do is they'll take your Kukiwan, which is so valuable that they'll take your Kwan rank. So I've been Judo Kwan, and they'll give you one higher. And so I was able to get my fifth degree in my Kwan rank, and that was a bit of a surprise. Where they said, "Yeah, we looked at your training resume, we looked at your certificates. You're due for your fourth degree in Kukiwan, and so we're going to get that up to date. And since we're going to do that, we're going to promote you to fifth degree in the Kwan." So, that was a surprise promotion. And then after that, um, I competed recently about a month ago in the Alaska State Taekwondo Championship for USA Taekwondo Circuit and competed in the men's world class under 40 recognized forms division. Now, I was the only one in my division, but this is not an easy tournament to get into. You have to actually be registered either through a USA Taekwondo school or you do like what I did and you compete unaffiliated. And since I'm a life member of USA Taekwondo as a paid member, I can still participate unaffiliated. And I was the only one in my division, and I was able to do my forms well enough to where I didn't get penalized, enough, and didn't get disqualified. Where I came away with the gold medal, and now have a bid to nationals.
Wow. Wow. And where's nationals at?
This year nationals are in Ontario, California, so I got to look at my leave schedule and my
Hmm.
work schedule and see if I can coordinate those two and maybe make a trip down there and shoot my shot.
Wow, that's great. Congratulations on that, Father Dan.
Oh, for sure. Thank you.
There's always pictures and things going up, and it's always you getting awarded a new medal, and I'm like, are they gonna run out? Like, 5th degree black belt? Is there a 6th? Like, how many what are you gonna be, a 10th degree black belt one day?
Realistically, it goes up to 9, and I know
What
the 10th degree is usually only, given for, like, the heads of a Quan,
mm,
and so it's more of an honorary thing, but realistically, ninth degree is the highest you could really earn,
wow.
but that's years away from now, so, yeah, but the journey I'm always, just humbled and surprised by, the journey just doesn't stop, and there's always things to do and things of that nature, so yeah.
I've, joined Duolingo, and And I've got, like, some friends I follow on there. I think I follow you on there, and I remember one day it came up with, like, you had done, like, 1,000 days straight or something on Duolingo. Am I wrong on this? Because I'm
Yeah,
pretty
I
sure
think
I saw that come up.
I'd gotten my finally got my 2-year streak, and now that I've gotten 2 years, I'm like, "Okay," I think because I was getting to the point where I was just like, I was doing it for the sake of the streak and not for the sake of learning, and I was like, "Yeah, it's time for me to just, dial it back and just realize that sometimes I'm too busy to do it every day." So, I was like, "You know what? Let
Well
me try to give it the 2-year streak,"
w
and yeah.
well, what language are you learning on there?
So I've been learning. So I was using Duolingo primarily for French and German. French because that's kind of like the second language from back in Louisiana.
Yeah.
So to solidify what I learned in school, and then German just because I watched a lot of World War II movies and stuff, and kind of always wanted to know what the Germans were saying.
Yeah.
Um, so there's that, and it's funny how I've gotten to use both of those at times, and I've celebrated mass in French already. Haven't done any masses in German. Um, but it's funny because there's several chaplains in the Air Force who do speak German because they were either stationed in Germany or, as a friend of mine, was born in Germany because he comes from a military family. So we're able to communicate that way as well. So it's yeah, yeah, just a little fun hobby.
I was feeling really, really proud of myself when I was hitting like the 35-day streak, and then it came up like, celebrate with your friend, Father Dan, it's 1,000 days. And I was like, what is, oh man. And I was totally demoralized after that, seeing that.
Yeah.
But, oh man. Is Latin on there? Do you know if Latin's on there?
There is, and actually, I did the Latin course. It's very, very basic though, and I
Mm,
mean, it's a dead language, and it's a rather complicated language, but
yeah,
it helps with some basic vocabulary, and that's typically all I really need to in my capacity as a priest is I'm not having to write sentences in Latin. It's really just for me to be able to read prayers and be able to somewhat understand what I'm praying, So
sure.
isn't
Yeah.
that enough concept?
Yeah. This is not an ad for Duolingo. I promise everyone out
No,
there that
yeah,
we're
yeah,
not.
yeah,
Unless Duolingo would like to give us their services for free, and then in that case, that yes, this is an ad for Duolingo,
yeah,
um, but no, I just wanted to really get everyone caught up. I really am happy that you came back to talk on my podcast. I'm happy to be a guest on yours for the same episode, and I just wanted to, do a catch up with you, Father Dan. So I
yeah,
really
definitely.
appreciate your time tonight.
For sure. Yeah. Glad to be back and good to see you again. Catch up.
Yeah. Well, let's do this again, and let's stay in touch for sure.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you.
Take care.